How is BigLaw currently doing when it comes to diversity?
So it's a familiar story in that diversity levels are higher at the summer associate and incoming associate levels, and lower when you start looking at partnership stats. But progress is being made, and the 2021 summer associate class was the most diverse class yet in every respect, as recorded by NAUP's latest annual diversity report. So just over 55% of that class were women, just over 41% were people of colour, and just over a quarter were women of colour. And NAUP also recorded the highest ever representation of LGBTQ+ summer associates, and that came in at just over 8%. So that's very promising, but the issue remains when it comes to retaining and promoting diverse individuals through to the higher ranks. A couple of years ago, NAUP did call upon its members and the legal community to do more to boost the representation of black lawyers in the industry. But despite the percentage of black lawyers increasing in 2021, that level of representation still falls behind the levels that have been recorded for Asian and Latinx lawyers, and that gap is only widening. So that does tie in with the feedback that we've been frequently receiving over the past year, certainly in terms of the anecdotal feedback that we've collected from the associates during our phone interviews. So it's very common for us to hear associates talking favourably about the firm's diversity efforts, but sources do consistently point to a distinct lack of representation of black lawyers, especially at the partnership level. So that's been a very noticeable recurring theme in associate comments in this round of research.
Do you think there are sufficient measures in place to improve diversity?
So I do think that more is being done than ever before, and the efforts around increasing diversity are more advanced and sophisticated than they've ever been. It is really encouraging to see so many firms taking part in Diversity Lab's Mansfield certification program. The sixth iteration of that program will begin in July, and with each passing year, the criteria for firms to get Mansfield certified has become more robust. So in this latest iteration, I believe there'll be some requirements around firm transparency over origination credit, which is a big, very important topic. I would encourage any student or lawyer who is looking to join a firm to see whether that firm is Mansfield certified. If they are, it means that they have met the baseline requirements to have considered at least 30% underrepresented individuals for senior positions at the firm. If a firm has Certified Plus status, that's even better, because it means that not only have they considered the 30%, but they've actually achieved that level of representation as well. So there's so much more to say about the Mansfield certification programs and the criteria that firms have to meet, but if people are interested, then do head on over to Diversity Lab's website to find out more. Now, last year I also mentioned that the increasing emphasis on equity in diversity efforts was really encouraging. That was all about firms looking at their systems and processes, whether they were tied to compensation or work assignment or feedback, to make sure that these systems were fair, accessible, and providing benefit for everyone. So one related example of this that we've come across recently is connected to the recruitment process and the introduction of online assessments. So Latham teamed up with Capfinity to design an online assessment for their hiring process, and there's also an organisation called Thine that are developing these assessments for candidates to take. Now, diversity isn't the only reason why they've been commissioned and deployed by firms, but the benefits for diversity and equity are that the assessments give recruiters more data points from which to make a decision on a candidate. So hopefully that will go some way to help reduce unconscious bias, because the specific data points will make it harder for interviewers to dismiss a candidate over vague statements like they just weren't a good fit. So I think that's a positive move, and is connected to this drive to make sure that systems at law firms are equitable.
What diversity content will be available in Associate 2022?
So we will be releasing our latest diversity stats that we've collected from the firms that participated in our research. So we'll be publishing those alongside our analysis of the stats pertaining to gender, ethnicity, disability, neurodivergence, LGBTQ plus individuals and intersectionality, and we're publishing those stories over the coming months. I can give you a sneak peek at some of our findings. So on the gender front, the average percentage of female partners across the firms we surveyed was 27.5%, while the average for female associates was 49.3%. So this has gone up. Our 2014 figures showed 18.7% female partners and 44.1% female associates. So while this is encouraging, clearly there's still quite some way to go before we start seeing gender parity at the partner level. When it comes to ethnicity and the breakdown of survey respondents, we had almost 4,000 responses in our survey this year. So from that, we can see that 83% of associates identified as white, 12.4% identified as Asian or Asian American, and 4.6% identified as Black or African American. So we did record a higher percentage of Black or African American associates stating that their intention to make partner this year. So in 2021, it was around about 11%, but in 2022, it was edging closer to 25%. So that's an increase in the intention to make partner that we've recorded this year. And that level of being closer to 25%, that is approaching the same level as other groups. So that's a positive change, and hopefully suggests that firms are creating environments and structures that enable more and more of their Black or African American associates to feel like partnership is an attainable option for them. So we'll also be categorising the best firms for DE&I as viewed by the respondents from our associate satisfaction survey. And then there's all of our sponsored DE&I content from firms as well. So we've got pieces on mentorship and sponsorship, opportunities in IP, affinity groups, the role of equity, well-being, navigating the partnership, and how associates can make an impact through pro bono. And also we've got an excellent podcast on an initiative called Candid Conversations.
Have there been any developments you think have impacted where lawyers want to be based?
So with the pandemic and the rise of remote working, you had lawyers realising that they didn't have to be physically based to be in a certain market in order to have access to the big ticket work that market attracts. So I do think that represented a real shift in how lawyers and law firms more broadly thought about location and where individuals could be based. So I think as we emerge from the pandemic and continue to emerge from it, I predict that we'll be interviewing many more associates who are based outside of major markets, but working on matters that are being run and organised from within them. So I also think the younger generation of lawyers will have an impact on which locations become more popular as well. So we know that this generation have greater expectations about having a better work-life balance and are more willing to consider living in more affordable cities where they can buy a home and hopefully have a better quality of life. So it's quite common for us to hear of or interview lawyers who have left the bigger legal markets and the top end of BigLaw in favour of moving to smaller firms and markets because they felt like they would have a more balanced and enhanced quality of life. The other related factor that I think may have an impact on where lawyers want to be based in the future is the emergence of tech hubs across the US, and they're pulling power for this next generation of lawyers. So we also know how attractive the tech sector is for this generation. So it will be interesting for us to see how rising tech hubs in places like Austin, Portland, Denver and Utah fare, and whether they account for a greater share of lawyers in the coming years. So that will definitely be a trend for us to keep an eye on.
Where can students and current lawyers look if they want to find out more about regional markets?
So they can look at our regional markets page, which can be accessed via the Chambers Associate homepage. We've built this up over the past couple of years, partly in response to the impact of the pandemic and lawyers looking to make a move outside of the major markets, but also just because we want our guide to be for a broad cross-section of aspiring and current lawyers. So if you want to be a finance lawyer in New York, we've got you covered. But equally, if you want to be a healthcare lawyer in Nashville, then we've also got you covered. The overall goal really is to show our audience the diversity of legal markets within the US and to demonstrate that you can be a successful lawyer in so many different places. The important part really is finding the right market for you rather than being guided by what is thought to be the most prestigious or sought after market to be in as a lawyer. So this year we will have new sponsored overviews of markets in Florida, Illinois, Michigan, Texas and Delaware, as well as overviews of New York and DC. We'll also have the results of our associate satisfaction surveys that will show which firms have been rated most highly for satisfaction within various markets, which include New York, Chicago, California, DC, Boston, Seattle, Philadelphia, Florida and Georgia. Now the other place people can look is on our career moves page. This is aimed at current lawyers who are considering a lateral move, and we have a designated changing location section which has overviews of different markets like Boston and also some of the tech hubs that I mentioned like Portland and Austin. So we're frequently producing new content on that page in collaboration with legal recruiters like Whistler, Voy Legal and Jawas Vargas. So definitely check that out if you're curious to know more about different markets in the US.
To hear more about all of these talking points, join us on June 8th for the launch of Chambers Associate 2022. We hope to see you there.